Hi.
Hi again. Ray is tracing the parallels in the history of Christendom with the Watchtower's development of traditions of its own, especially respecting religious councils. And now he goes to the Watchtower to see what's the Watchtower view of religious councils. Here we go. As eventually took place in the early centuries, a religious council has taken on a permanent character, one of constant control internationally. The May 15, 1986 Watchtower contained an article asking the question, are religious councils approved by God? On page 24, it defined an ecclesiastical council as a representative church assembly with deliberative and often legislative authority in questions of faith, morals, and church discipline. Back to Ray, the writer who proceeds to argue that God does not approve of such councils evidently did not realize that the quoted definition perfectly describes what the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses is. Its sessions are for the very purpose of deliberating on and frequently legislating on questions of faith, morals, and church discipline. That is what we did virtually every week during the 9 years of my membership on that body.
Wow. In discussing Emperor Constantine's role in early councils, the same Watchtower article on page 15 quotes historian H.G. Wells as saying, quote, "The idea of stamping out all controversy and division, stamping out all thought, by imposing one dogmatic creed upon all believers, is the idea of the single-handed man who feels that to work at all, he must be free from opposition and criticism. From him, Constantine, the Church acquired the disposition to be authoritative and unquestioned, to develop a centralized organization. Charges of heresy proved to be a ruthless scheme to eliminate opponents who dared to defy Christendom's church councils. Any who expressed differing opinions or even attempted to present scriptural proof refuting the dogmas and canons or church laws of the councils were branded as heretics." That's the end of H.G. Wells' quote.
I think we'll just butt in here for a second just to point out that there is a footnote to this.
Oh.
An ironic footnote, because as Ray says at the bottom of page 109, interestingly, the Watchtower article on page 26 quotes a historical work as stating that aside from the one Jerusalem council described in Acts chapter 15, all councils are products of the post-apostolic church. They do not belong to the period of the foundation of the church. Again, the writer evidently failed to recognize that this presents the Jerusalem Council as a one-time occasion, not as part of an ongoing permanent arrangement for regular sessions of some type of governing body.
That's the opposite of what they believe. Yeah. Okay. So now we'll continue after H.G. Wells' quote with Ray. Again, the writer evidently did not realize that the description of the disposition of Constantine was a very apt description of the disposition of the Watchtower organization's second president, JF Rutherford, during whose regime a determined centralization of authority also took place. In the Society-sponsored book Faith on the March by longtime headquarters representative A.H. Macmillan, the author says of Rutherford, quote, "He would never tolerate anything that would be contrary to what he clearly understood the Bible to teach. He was so strict about that. He would permit nothing that would seem to show a compromise when it came to an issue of truth." Now,
Macmillan quotes Rutherford, or rather refers to Rutherford approvingly of his ruthlessness. But then Ray comments, the authority which enabled him to tolerate or not tolerate, to permit or not permit disagreement by others with what he personally understood as truth, was something he insisted upon as his presidential prerogative. Again, going back to the corporate model of how things must work. He effectually took away the control exercised by a board of directors, eliminated completely an editorial board, assumed full authority over everything published, and forced the departure of those staff members unwilling to support these and similar actions. This was proclaimed as, quote, a weeding out, a time of judgment, a cleansing of the entire organization set apart to become the household of God's servants. That's the words of Macmillan in Faith on the March.
Yeah.
Back to Ray. As shown in Crisis of Conscience, the supreme authority of the presidency that he fought for and succeeded in gaining was removed from that position in 1976 and passed on to a body of men, a governing body. But that is essentially all that happened, a transferal of power and authority from an individual to a collective religious council. Though expressions of hope were initially made that the change would promote a more humble, brotherly spirit, the fact is that the disposition to be authoritative and unquestioned, to develop a centralized organization, which historian Wells spoke of, remained. As stated, the blunt, sometimes coarse language employed by Rutherford was replaced by more scholarly, more intellectually appealing presentations. Yet, that same disposition that resents, deprecates, and seeks to silence any difference of viewpoint clearly controls the actions and decisions and outlook of the religious council called the governing body. Mm-hmm. The evidence thus far presented and that which follows is but a fraction of that available to demonstrate the validity of this statement. Mm. And in the next segment, Ray moves to equating an organization with God and Christ.